Am I not on? All right. For those that just arrived, we had a sign up in the back, and we've got two portions. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty. So I quickly perused the request to speak. We have about 25, and I think the way that we're going to handle it is everyone can have up to 2 minutes. No one is required to take the full 2 minutes, and if you can make a new point, that's great. We had lots of people take advantage of the public comment who said they couldn't attend the hearing. I'm sure the other board members read those. Those were all forwarded to us by our communications director, Tracy Havishaline. And in addition, people are always welcome to also send emails. So having already read a couple dozen of the emails and the comments, we'll now open up public hearing and just would ask that folks refrain from making noise or commenting or applauding speakers while they're speaking. And if we can just treat everyone as you would want to be treated, we'll be good to go. All right, first up, we have Michelle Hendricks from Ward Avenue in Hudson.
Hello. Hopefully I can get this through in 2 minutes. First, I just wanted to say thank you for giving us the opportunity for public comment. And I also wanted to thank you for choosing to get our children back to normal life, and thank you for not requiring masks. I did see that the mask requirement is subject to change and wanted to touch on that briefly. couple things that I wanted to point out that have been actively ignored by the media and many politicians. So masks that are N95 or better and properly fitted do work, but the fabric masks that you buy from the store literally do nothing to protect anyone. If you can see the holes in the fabric, the mask, but you can't see the virus, sorry, worked up. So if the virus is smaller than the holes in the fabric that we can see, then how is the mask protecting us? It doesn't take a scientist to know that something smaller can go through a hole that's bigger than itself. If fabric masks work so well, why has it taken us to the year 2020 to figure out that essentially pulling your shirt over your face would have saved us from thousands of years of disease and plagues? In countries where women wear burqas, do they have significantly lower rate of viral disease transmission? I implore you to not require masks for our children as things change throughout the year. It's not only ridiculous when logic is applied, but it only has negative effects. My child's 5.5 years old, and children at a young age need to see people's faces. They need to see how people talk to help develop their language skills. They need to see people's expressions as they learn how to read body language, interpret others' feelings. They need to see people's faces to capture and maintain their attention. They need to hear people's voices not muffled through a piece of fabric. Young children were dealt a significant blow in learning when the schools went remote. Last I checked, not every household has the luxury of one parent to stay at home with their kid all day long. This path not only actively discriminated against certain groups of children, but left others completely in the dust. My child was one of those. He was receiving speech, occupational, and physical therapy through special education. When the schools stopped having in-person learning, he literally had nothing. When he was not receiving these services while other children were, this violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. Luckily, this last year, we were able to get in person for the most part, but with the mask requirement, it continues to dampen his ability to learn. With having a severe speech delay, the type of speech therapy recommended involves him seeing someone's face and having a speech therapist touch his face to help him make sounds. Needless to say, he made very little, if any, progress in the speech department over the last year. I'm almost done.
Well, if you've ended your point, I appreciate it. If I let everybody go 1 minute over, then we're
Oh,
going to be.
Yep.
all right,
No,
all right.
that's fine. That was
Right.
pretty much my point.
Thank
Thank you for getting back to normal. I appreciate it.
All right. Next up, we have Stephanie Oustegen, and I hope maybe I missed a couple syllables there. I'm sorry, Stephanie, but you're on Waldrop Farm Road.
Correct. Hi, I'm Stephanie Oustegen, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak on this subject this evening. I have my last child coming through the high school and have had 3 previous who've attended the Hudson School District, and have been so pleased with the leadership, and I really thank you for your service here as board members and the superintendent as well. My point tonight is that masking our school-aged children for the K through 12 time of their lives sacrifices the social, emotional, and physiological development of our future leaders. School boards have no right to trump the family's personal responsibility in the area of personal health measures. The fear over COVID-19 is threatening to replace our freedoms over personal health decisions. I took a representative sample of the 3 highest rated mask offerings at a big box retailer and read the disclaimer and descriptions of the products, and I have them here. The first one is actually the brand We Care face masks, and the disclaimer is this is not an N95. This is a general use face mask. This mask is not intended for medical use and not proven to reduce the transmission of disease. The second highest rated mask is the ALG Patriot N95 mask. And within the description, it does state these masks are not intended for medical or surgical use and should not be used in a clinical setting. They do not prevent the transmission of any disease to the wearer. The masks have not been FDA cleared or approved. And then the final is a 3M daily face mask. And a little bit of the description I thought quite interesting. It says, Whether you're traveling, running errands, attending personal appointments, or doing other activities where face coverings are needed, reach for the daily face mask. By wearing a mask that's adjustable to your face and comfortable, you are doing your part to show you care for your community's well-being. And then the disclaimer states they are not intended for medical use and do not eliminate the risk for contracting any disease or infection. If you have health conditions such as asthma, heart conditions, or respiratory conditions, you must consult your healthcare provider before use. Thank you for listening. That is all I have.
Thank you. Next up, we have Rob Brown from Omaha Road.
Good evening, School Board, Dr. Ouellette, administration. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We've been here before. Last year, we've spent time as a community focusing on how do we best make sure our kids stay in school and that they remain healthy, that they're able to participate in their school programs. It's a challenge. Certainly, many school districts go through the challenges of trying to figure out how to best serve their communities. Everyone here, I believe, believes children are important. They believe that they should be in school full-time. We may differ a bit on a few areas, but the long and the short is, if we can keep our kids in school, and the administration has focused on data, turning that data into information and making objective decisions that keep our kids in school, then I would suggest we continue supporting our school district towards that end. On slide 5 of 18 in the presentation that was part of the agenda, it says masks are optional. We will monitor and adjust the face mask protocol as needed. My suggestion, as last year we had a matrix that was provided to the community. If there's a way to take the subjectivity out of any decisions that may impact our community, that might drive a wedge into our community, allowing that matrix developed through objective data that is transparent and public will go a long way. Will we make everyone happy? Certainly not. But it'll go a long way towards whatever decisions ultimately the board makes and the administration recommends to the board. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next up, Beth Weisskopf of Donegal Way.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing 2 minutes tonight. This is such an emotional topic and people need to be heard, so I really do appreciate the extra time. I have a petition, which I gave to Tim also, one for each of you to look at, to the Hudson School Board to make masks optional for the coming school year, just like your plan allows as of now. As of last night at 7 p.m., we collected 224 signatures going door to door and holding 2 signing events in person, and 253 signatures in our online petition that we created and shared with our contacts directly, not through a company like change.org like I did in the spring. We had a total of 477 signatures in 1 week. As of right before this meeting, our online signatures were at 278 for a total of 502 signatures total. All those that have signed have Hudson School District addresses, except for a couple who have chosen to open enroll their children in the Hudson School District and feel like they should have their voices be heard also. We are asking that you give families the choice to choose what is right for them. Those that want to mask can, and those that don't have to. Those that are not comfortable with this can participate in distance learning. So far, 19 out of 5,609 students enrolled in the Hudson School District have signed up for distance learning. That is less than 0.5% of our student population. Over 99% of families want their children to be in person and decided this while we were mask optional this summer. I have sent you numerous studies and articles showing that kids are not the spreaders, nor are they severely affected by this virus. There is not one documented case in the US where a student transmitted the virus to a teacher. Last year, Hudson didn't have one positive case from close contact. At this junction, educators and community members interested in vaccination have been vaccinated. The FDA is pulling the PCR tests off the shelves because they have been deemed faulty. How many cases last year through today were false positives? Because of this, viruses will never go away. They run their course. They always do. Our Board of Education, I'm almost done, is charged with safeguarding the education of our kids. You are not elected to take on the burden of public health, nor should you have the responsibility of weighing in our healthcare matters that is best left to parents and their healthcare providers. You should be encouraging families to make the decision that is right for their own family. The school district is not a medical organization. Please leave the health decisions up to the families and stick to educating their kids. And I would like to suggest that you do a survey like you did last year with going back to school to see what the majority of the families in Hudson would like. Thank you.
Next up, we have Margaret Harris of Summer Street North.
Hi, thank you. I just want to start, my name, like you said, Margaret Harris. I have 3 kids in the Hudson School District. We did choose to homeschool our children last year because of the mask mandate. I would add that my kids have been thriving throughout the homeschooling and throughout summer and participating in close contact sports, all-day camps, sleepovers, play dates, and without restrictions. I want to talk about why I think masks should be optional, as I feel they do more harm than good. They have not been proven to be effective, and the virus particles have been proven to be too small to be stopped by these flimsy masks. Let's talk about the science a little bit. There was a study done in Germany of 26,000 school children, and they found that 68% of children had problems while wearing masks, including irritability, headaches, difficulty concentrating, less happiness, reluctance to go to school, impaired learning, and drowsiness or fatigue. Another study that was even more concerning to me was a research published by the Journal of the American Medical Association for Pediatrics, found that wearing masks caused children to inhale too much carbon dioxide. Normal CO2 levels are 0.04%, upper safety limits are 0.2%, and children wearing masks were getting as much as 1.6%. I won't even go into the amount of bacteria that builds up on masks after children wearing them for an entire day. And as others have stated, this is not a children's illness. There's risks involved in everything that our kids do, and they're more likely to be affected by other things such as flu, car accidents, drowning, and all these other horrible things. Yes, even considering the Delta variant. Yet we still allow them to live normal lives and not force them to live in a bubble or in fear. My kids were so excited to come back to school this year, but now said that they would prefer to stay home again if they have to wear masks. I'm not going to subject my kids to a year of faceless teachers and friends. I just want you guys to take the full picture into consideration when making the decision, and look at the overall well-being of kids. And I feel like this should be a decision made by families, and it's a personal medical choice. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Jacob German, Trout Brook Road.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I don't have anything prepared formally. I just wanted to speak my mind real quick here at the town board or the school board meeting. This coming year, mainly I want to talk about the mask wearing with the kids. And I fully agree with the current board position to have mask wearing optional. And I strongly encourage the board to consider keeping that optional all year. There are no studies that are out there that show mask wearing, has the masks that are worn, that our children have been wearing in the manner that they've been allowed to wear them. They don't stop the spread of this virus. This virus is going to go where it's going to go. And the measures that you would have to take, which a hospital setting takes to limit the spread, you can't do in a school. So the masks, as we've had them last year, they were doing nothing for the children. Well, they were doing something, nothing positive. It inhibits, I mean, just thinking about going through school myself, the student, I mean, there's all kinds of nonverbal communication that happens behind that mask that the kids are missing, especially for hearing impaired students. And beyond that, I have five children in this district. Last year, my second oldest had 13 absences from headaches. He's never had headaches before. That was a last year thing for him, and I'm fully convinced that the headaches were from wearing a mask 8 hours a day. So that's my opinion on the matter, and I just want the board to consider continuing the full year maskless, if at all possible.
Thank you. Tim Congdon. And I'm sorry, Tallgren Street, it says.
Name's Tim. I'm from down in Troy Township. We've got 2 graduates and 1 still in the district here in Hudson. So start out just with a quick thank you to all of you for the time that you put in as board members, and everything else. It's a dirty, thankless job answering dozens of the emails from passionate people on both sides of this topic that we're discussing right now. With that, I wanted to thank you also for what I would say is a well thought out back to school blueprint. I read through the presentation that was in the agenda, and I like it, like others have been saying, especially the point about keeping masks optional. I really do think that's important for us as well. As others have mentioned, there's whether we're talking about a piece of paper that came from overseas that we're strapping over our face, or a scrap of cloth that was in grandma's sewing room, there's really not that much that they're doing for us anyways. My regular work as a firefighter, one of the things we talk about a lot is risk-benefit analysis. Every decision we make is based on weighing the risks versus the rewards of what we're going to do. We've talked about the rewards already, and they're not really there of, say, a mandatory mask kind of thing, because they're just not as effective as maybe we would like that to be. Now let's look at the risk side. Some might say, well, there's no risk. What's the big deal if you just have to wear it? Just put up and shut up, whatever else. What I do in my work, not only have we been, as much as I detest the term, the whole frontline worker, responder kind of thing, whatever else, we've been doing this for almost a couple of years now. And what I'm seeing as a far bigger effect than all of this COVID stuff is the effects on people of that losing that nonverbal communication. We can't see faces. We can't read body language. I'm doing that right now as I'm looking at you, listening to my comments. We take that away when we cover up people's faces. It's a huge thing for us. And what we're seeing out on the quote unquote front lines is increased depression, addiction problems, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, all kinds of these other psychological effects, I'll close it up here, that we're losing. So there is a significant risk in taking away nonverbal communication. So I really would encourage you to, as you continue, whether it's that whole make a decision now as the year goes on, maybe you have to reevaluate as we did last year, keep that in the back of your mind. What are the rewards versus what are the risks of the action that we're going to take? So thank you again for all that you do.
All right, next up, Jennifer Nordgren. of 8th Street in Hudson.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Norden, and I have a freshman entering high school this year. Very excited. I was looking at your little statement of what you're dedicated to, and I'm gonna give you some reminders of that as I read through, that you are collectively committed to providing a rigorous, student-centered environment to ensure equitable experiences for all students. As you move forward, making decisions regarding COVID this year, I just have some bullet points. They're very blunt because I've seen a lot of the damage that's been done this last school year with friends and family, and their experiences with their students having to do distance learning, having to navigate the quarantine go-rounds and the masks and all of the things that were supposedly supposed to keep them safe. And I do want to remind the school district that there have been more suicides in the school district in the last couple of years than the deaths of children from COVID. So keep that in mind. The first thing I would like to remind you is that choosing to accept or decline any medical device or medical product is a human right. Number two, masks are a respiration altering medical device and must remain optional for the entire school year. Number three, COVID testing is an unreliable, invasive medical procedure that must remain optional. Number four, vaccines, whether experimental or FDA approved, are medical products and must remain optional. Number six, my child's body is not government property. Parents have the right to choose to follow the advice of our own medical professionals and doctors, and not the CDC, not the NIH, not the Department of Health, and certainly not the Department of Education when it comes to personal family medical decisions. I just want to remind you that viruses come and go, but the loss of freedom is forever. Thank you.
Next up is Shelly Vance from 6th Street, presuming that's Hudson. After Ms. Vance, I have Dan Buckle is up next. I'll just try to announce who's up next so that you can be ready, all right?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for letting us speak, and thank you for all that you're doing for our children. I'm a Hudson resident. I have two kids, one going in 6th grade and one going into kindergarten. Just have a few bullet points. Number one, COVID spread in children is minuscule. Number two, COVID spread from children to adults is minuscule. Number three, where risk exists, there must be a choice as to whether we wear masks, vaccinate, social distance, etc. The social, emotional, and physical toll is far more great to simply say, take one for the team. Please stand for our children and let us parents decide what is best for our kids. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you for the hard work you're doing for our kids.
Thank you. Next up is Dan Buckle of Cratley Lane, and after him it will be Carol Ivance, if I'm reading that right.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Buckle. I'm entering my 12th year as a school counselor in the middle school in Hudson. And a couple things I just want to say is, number one, thank you guys very much for your consideration of looking at making masks optional for the school year. I know what it means and what you're going up against. So I really appreciate the thoughtful consideration you've put towards that. As one of your employees, as a person that sits in your schools, I thought I could just share a little bit about some of the effects of masks that I saw last year, just for your consideration to think about as you look at the school year coming up, because I know you're gonna have to face some hard decisions at some point. One of the things I saw in my office after seeing hundreds of kids is I did see an increase in anxiety. What was that about? Masking, COVID restrictions, plexiglass, sure, all those things. But some of the things that were specific were like my new students that came in, they tried to make relationships with kids in the school, and they had a really hard time doing that. I've been doing this for a long time, and new student, and Hudson in particular, is really great at making new relationships. And my new students had a harder time than ever this year. So I want that to be just a consideration as you look at that, as the new information might come to you this year. I also saw something really unique as students started talking about masks being optional for this year, this coming year. We would have conversations and I'd say, well, what do you think you're going to do? And they would, some of them said, I'm still going to wear the mask. And I said, okay, tell me about that. It was not for health reasons. It was because they liked to hide, because they felt bad about the way they looked. They felt bad about their acne. They felt bad about being an awkward middle school kid, which we all did at that time. But that's not a healthy response. Not to be able to hide from those things, to not go through those things with your peers, it's not a healthy way to go through adolescence. So they're not deciding that because they're scared of COVID, because they want to have healthy bodies. It's because they're middle schoolers and sometimes they take the easy way out. And for the staff, I saw a dramatic decrease in satisfaction in their jobs, including myself. It was a hard year to go through. So my only quick request is, as you look at the new data that comes through, as you have to face these decisions, I would request that you just have a committee formed that could actually look at all the data and the science that's involved in making a decision to mask or not, and then present that data, that science to the public so we can know what's going on inside in your thought process. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Next up is Carol Ivance of Norwood Drive, and after that, John Stoyan.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for your hard work. And at the moment, I think your idea of making masks optional is wonderful, but in this last year and a half or so, we've seen far too many flip-flops from Fauci to various government agencies. And so I want to ask you to keep the masks optional. If people want to wear them and they have a good reason, that's, their body. But, if you consider making them not optional again, I guess I'm asking the following question. What science are you following when you claim to have good reason to force masks on anyone, but especially our most vulnerable? And they're, like people have said, not proven to even get COVID, much less pass it on. The onus is on you to explain your reasons. I don't need evidence that they're dangerous, partly because I'm a nurse, partly because it's too obvious. Fourth grade science, our bodies run on oxygen, plants run on CO2, you can't cross them. But I have read numerous studies that prove that not only are flimsy cloth or paper mask coverings not effective, for one thing, because of the infinitesimally small size of a virus, but they're actually harmful. Our oxygen levels should be 92% or higher to maintain proper brain functioning, but any mask will drop that to the 80 or even in some cases 70 percentiles within minutes. And these kids are wearing them all day long. And you ask, what about surgical suites? They pump in more oxygen into surgical suites. As far as floor nurses, there are very, very few instances where we need to wear masks. Usually it's only gowns and gloves, and it's not for very long. Carbon dioxide levels, like someone else said, reach alarmingly high levels, especially in children. They are the most vulnerable. That explains the irritability, headaches, restlessness, difficulty thinking, concentrating. Okay, I have a lot of other stuff, but okay, I want to say masks are totally ineffective. Even worse, they're harmful. And mandating and worse, forcing anyone to wear one is illegal and unconstitutional. I have autonomy over my body, not the state, not the school board, nobody else. And until a child is 18, they can't even get their ears pierced without parental consent. So the government certainly cannot force this on any of us. And I've got lots more, but thank you for your time and thank you again for your hard work.
John Stoyan of Laurel Avenue. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. You can correct me. And then Kristen Emerson is next.
My name is John Stogen. I have 2 kids in the Hudson School District. I served for 15 years as a military officer providing data analytics and recommendations to senior leaders. So I understand how complex data can be and how important it is to rely on experts and people that have experience working with complex data. It's not necessarily about who yells the loudest. In this case, we have those experts within the CDC and within our own county health departments. What I ask of the administration and also the school board is that we just follow those recommendations that are coming from the CDC and these experts that have that experience in order to make these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kristen Emerson of Green Street and then Therese Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Kristen Emerson. I have a graduate, and then I also have somebody going into their sophomore year here at the high school. Not one person up here has mentioned the Delta strain. Okay, what we're dealing with right now is not what we were dealing with when we shut down a year ago, right? We're dealing with something a lot more contagious. The current COVID strain, the Delta, is 1.23 times more contagious than the Alpha strain. A doctor named Larry Brilliant, an epidemiologist with WHO, who helped eradicate smallpox, by the way, viruses do go away, says this may be the most contagious virus in living memory. Child hospitalizations have seen the steepest increase since the pandemic began. This is not the COVID strain that doesn't affect children. Okay, this strain is killing children, and without adult vaccination at a herd immunity rate, we can only expect more contagious, dangerous variants to mutate into our vulnerable populations. Who are Hudson's most vulnerable? Our children. Not only the 12 and under who can't get the vaccine, but also the 12 to 18-year-olds who may have parents who choose not to protect them with the vaccine. A mask optional approach is a blueprint for disaster. I'm pretty sure he asked us to
Okay,
decide.
if I asked at the beginning if people could be polite and treat others as you would want to be treated, evidently we have many in here that can't follow that rule. But if you could please remain quiet, everyone has a chance to get their 2 minutes, and I'm going to stop the clock here and allow you to finish, please.
Thank you. Both the CDC and the St. Croix County Public Health recommendations currently, they now both recommend that all people, vaccinated or otherwise, wear masks in public places inside school buildings. That includes staff, students, and visitors. I think it would be a big mistake to ignore that recommendation. To compound matters, it seems as though IDL is no longer an option. So families who want to use that option aren't able to at this point. Families who feel unsafe sending their children into an unmasked environment don't really have a choice. Families of students with IEPs don't have an option to open enroll elsewhere. We're stuck here, no matter what you do. So how are you going to protect unvaccinated, maybe the unvaccinated autistic child who really can't wear a mask? How are you going to protect that kid, right? From what he could be experiencing, he or she could be experiencing. What are you going to do to protect the most vulnerable? Now, that was my comment. This is a petition. We haven't been working all summer. We haven't been going door to door. We started this petition, I guess, when we saw the back to school blueprint. We've got about 200 signatures. So, you know, they win, yep. But I do want to read it to you and submit it. The CDC has recommended masks in schools, and that recommendation is made by the communicable disease experts. The Delta variant of COVID-19 is much more communicable. Viral loads are virtually the same in exposed people, regardless of vaccination status. This variant is making unvaccinated people and kids sicker. Kids under the age of 12 cannot yet get the vaccine and therefore are unprotected. Mask usage last year prevented inherently.
Are you almost done?
Well, I am, but
Can you just submit the petition and we'll be able to read it?
I can, and I believe it was sent via email. to
All
you
right,
as
very
well.
good. Thank you for your comments.
Yep.
Next up, we have Breton German of Trout Brook Road. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Therese Mitchell, I said was next, right? I turned. Therese Mitchell of Sand Hill Point Road North.
Thank you. Thank you, board members, for listening to me and the rest of the people here tonight. As you can tell, we all feel very strongly and care about our children a great deal. I was happy to see the back to school plan that endorses in-person learning. I think it's critical for students to come back in person. I don't think virtual learning works very well. So I commend you on that. I think that's critical. But I think if you're going to have in-person learning, you also have to mitigate the risk factors. How do you do that? You do it through mask mandate. You do it through social distancing and cleaning protocols. You probably can't social distance with a full school, so that probably is a reduced mitigating factor. The other thing you can do is try to encourage people to get vaccinated, and you don't really have a lot of control over that. You do have control over mandating the masks. I didn't plan to spend time on this, but I heard various comments about cloth masks don't protect. I think the experts at the Mayo Clinic would choose to disagree. I can certainly send you a number of studies that have clearly shown cloth masks do protect. There was also a reference to a JAMA article about carbon dioxide levels. That study has been retracted and debunked as not containing enough scientific, as containing numerous scientific issues. The JAMA retracted that about a month ago. There's nothing illegal or unconstitutional about requiring masks. That's another fallacy that exists out there. I would encourage you to revisit it. I think one person, a previous speaker, mentioned about trying to remove the subjectivity and the emotion involved and trying to come up with some sort of matrix where it's actually based in facts and science, not in ideology. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Breton German of Trout Brook Road. And then after Mr. German, we have Sean German. So.
Hello, I kind of came here on short notice. I kind of learned that this was happening tonight, so I'm just going to kind of tell you what I think. Last year, I was a freshman at this high school, and I can tell you that having the cohorts was kind of horrible for my personal friendships, along with having to wear masks and other just social distancing and other things was pretty damaging. Plus, gym. I don't even know why you're required to wear a mask during gym. That's just a horrible idea. Like absolutely, that should just not be the case. Like you get tired when you're doing gym. You have to breathe. The mask reduces it. Plus, you're getting more carbon dioxide in. And if you're doing it indoors, it's even worse. We had, I think, a unit where we were doing indoors. We had to do a bunch of exercises because it was raining. We just had to do everything indoors, I guess, that day. But either way, I think masks were not really needed in that situation, considering what we were doing. Well, yeah, some of my friendships didn't go too well this year, and I really don't want to wear masks this year again. I'm kind of happy that you guys are making it not necessarily required this year that we have to wear masks. I hope you continue that.
Thank you for your comments. Next up is Sean German, and after Sean is Scooter Wine or Witt. Not sure.
Good evening. I just want to talk really kind of quickly. I have 5 kids in the district. This isn't the first time I've come before the board for various safety reasons, but I am thankful that you have decided to make it optional this year until it's not. What I'm concerned about is when it's not, and who's going to make that decision. Is it just the board? Or are you going to ask for public comment and for surveys? I just know that these masks are not working for kids. They get COVID at school and everybody's wearing masks. They bring it home. Everybody gets sick. it's silly to mask our kids. One, they can't see their faces. I'm a people person. I work in the people business. It is so crucial to see the emotion on people's faces and to see when they light up or if they're making a disgust face at you, because I hear that's happening when my kids come home, that they can make faces at teachers or whatever, and it's super disrespectful, right? But teachers don't see that, and I think it's important that they see it. I also think that like not just last year, but the spring when it hit, my kids, I have 2 on IEPs, had to go through a very excruciating last part of the year, kind of pushed to the side. And they just didn't have the support that they needed. This last year was fine. I had a middle schooler who had 13 absences. I went to the school and I said, I want a printout of all my kids' absences. Why are they being absent? I was called. So I missed 13 days of work too, because I have to go pick them up every time for just a headache. And he is an IEP. He jumps and he flaps and he's very animated. He works himself up. He's tired. He's not getting the oxygen he needs. So inadvertently, he's getting headaches. So if we could it always should have been optional for kids to wear a mask. It shouldn't be forced upon them. And I think that's the hardest part, because I understand where the opposite side is, where you should mask, right? But it's just, there's just not enough studies to say that they're actually working. And if they're going to be masked, they should be working properly. And in this case, we can't. I can make 100 masks, and 100 masks are not going to prevent them from getting the virus. So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I hope you're Scooter from Run Lane. And if you could say your last name, because I'm sorry, I can't read. White? Okay, that is a T. It's just, all right, very
Yeah,
good.
sorry about that. My name is Scooter White. I appreciate you guys hearing us and listening to our public voice today. I have a child in the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school here in the Hudson School District. I just recently retired from the military after 21 years and have served all over the world. And I appreciate the fact that we have our freedoms here in America. Seeing the way that mandatory things happen in different countries and different parts of the world is really, it's eye-opening. There's not studies that I can tell you that I've read about it, but I've seen it personally, the way that it affects people. Doing that to our kids now, forcing them to wear a mask. We are not telling people who want to wear a mask that they can't. We are asking you to give our children, we as parents, the choice to allow our kids to wear a mask or to not wear a mask. I really, really appreciate the blueprint that you guys have provided for the school year. I would love if you guys just said masks are optional the entire year. It would take decisions off of your hands and put it in the parents' hands and let them deal with that the entire year. So thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up is Rachel Eby, and then after Rachel is Sarah Gare.
First of all, thank you very much for all the hard work that you do making these decisions. I don't envy your job in that, but thank you for putting thought and consideration to what's best for all of our children. We all have the same goal. We want our kids to be healthy. We want the best learning environment and with as little disruption as possible. Last year was really hard on families. It was really hard on teachers. And I think that we all hoped that this would all be behind us by now, but we simply can't will it away. At the end of last year, we didn't know what would happen with variants over this summer. As the school year wrapped up last year, I anticipated being able to get a vaccine for my youngest child, who's 11, sometime in September, and be able to begin the new school year with that option at least on the table. But it is not. We now have the Delta variant that's ticking up higher and affecting younger people. I currently have a friend who is younger than me, he's in his 30s, and he is in the ICU. The FDA is now not anticipating approval for the vaccine for kids under 12 until midwinter, which gives them 5 months together
with little to reduce transmission. If I'd known all of this earlier in the school year, not at the end of this summer, I might have been able to find an online option for my youngest daughter, who's too young to get vaccinated, but at this time of the year, most enrollment for those options is closed. So like the previous speaker said, I'm kind of stuck. For many families, going online wouldn't be an option in any case, as we all experienced last year. And that was kind of a miserable experience for a lot of people, going back and forth online and then in person. It wasn't, our in-person schools aren't designed to be online. I understand that. None of us want to upend our lives, and but we want a reasonably safe environment for our children. So I would just ask that at least until we have a vaccine available, we don't consider masks the enemy. We consider the virus the enemy and the transmission of the virus the enemy. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, I think it's Gehr, Gehr, and from Grandview Drive, and then Emily Janish is next.
Hi. I don't have anything prepared. Speaking publicly actually terrifies me, but I feel more strongly about this than that. I just want to follow up on what a couple people had said. I think Beth talked about polling your parents, and I think that's so incredibly important because when I first saw the blueprint, I was cautiously optimistic, and then I saw the petition going around, the continuing to make masks optional petition. And I cannot tell you how many people I sent it to whose response was, why are you worried about this? The school district already put out their blueprint and masks are not on the table. We can stop worrying, we can let down our guard. And a lot of people did. And I imagine that's why every seat in here isn't full, is because a lot of people have no idea. Second of all, I just wanted to just remind everybody to have a little perspective as far as our kids are at a greater risk of getting in an accident on the way to school than they are of becoming dangerously sick from COVID. So perspective is a good thing. Also, I just wanted to share, if some people aren't aware that, well, when we saw what happened last year, my husband and I came up with a plan for this year. I did have one son come home to homeschool partway through the year last year. So for this year, anticipating the same issues, we got my youngest enrolled at Trinity, where they did not mask at all last year, no outbreak. I'm not sure how much Hudson School District and Trinity are in communication with each other, but they would be great ones to talk to as far as how's it going to go without any masks. And again, to just reiterate what so many other people have said, we aren't telling anybody that they cannot wear a mask. And like they said, if they're very confident that they work, then by all means, do it. And then you should have no issue that I won't put my kids in a mask. We're all done.
Emily Janish, and then Cynthia Hassan.
Hi, good evening. Emily Janish. I have 4 kids here in the Hudson School District, and I'm here to speak in favor of requiring masks. This is about safety. That is what this comes down to, medical or otherwise. My husband has been a safety professional for over 15 years, and OSHA relied on safety professionals to create safety protocols for workplaces, which require masks for their employees. Our children are no different. We have safety requirements all over the place in this country. We have to wear seatbelts, life jackets, helmets, eye protection. The school district would never allow our children to take a field trip without safety measures. If they were taking a swimming field trip, I'm pretty sure that you would require our children to be wearing life jackets to keep them safe so you wouldn't have drowning or some horrific event on your hands. Why would they take this safety risk? Masks mitigate risk. Masks are required on buses as federally mandated. Our students are still going to need to be wearing masks. If anything, I would ask you to consider a compromise requiring masks for those 12 and under who are at highest risk. I ask that you provide safety measures for our children and think of those that are the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Cynthia Hassan, and then next is Nikki Robbins.
Good evening. I'm Cynthia Hassan, and I have 7 grandchildren in the Hudson School District. And unfortunately, many of my family members have had COVID, and I've had at least one pass away from COVID. So I obviously am coming from a place of you do everything to protect yourself and your family members. A lot of us still have family members who are very, very vulnerable. And with young children who are not protected, and if we can't protect them, they're at risk to spread to other individuals. So I'm absolutely in support of the mask mandate for children to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Nikki Robbins, and then Stacy from Bailey Road.
Good evening. My name is Nikki Robbins. Thank you for taking our comment and thank you for your service as board members. Appreciate it. I just really want to say I'm in support of those that have asked for masks to remain optional. I believe it's the parents' right to make health decisions for their children. Masking, vaccinations, all of that should be on the parents. And as a previous speaker said, if people are so adamant that masks work, then they have the right to put their kids in them or keep them at home and homeschool. They don't have to put their kids at risk. And for those who believe that not being masked is the safest thing for their child, they can decide. Please leave the decision with the parents. Thank you.
Next up, Stacy from Bailey Road. Might be a Vipler. Kepka, okay.
That's okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear our voices and our concerns. It's greatly appreciated. I'm a mom of 4 children. I also have many nieces and nephews, many of them which are in the, recently just graduated out of the Hudson School District. I just, first of all, I want to say thank you for making the masks optional for our children. And I would just ask that moving forward, that you would make the mask, COVID testing, contact tracing, and COVID vaccines optional and up to the parents' discretion. We know our children best, and we know what's best for them physically and mentally. I think I'm more concerned about the mental health of my children at this point than I am of COVID. In fact, a couple of my children have already had COVID and have recovered, but just so much of the mental health decline that I've seen in some of my nieces and nephews. I've seen issues with having to do credit recovery, struggling in school, doing online school, going in person, the back and forth, many missing days of school due to headaches, just the overall stress of what has taken place. I think I would just like to ask how many kids in the school district pass away from COVID-19, and then how many are we concerned about mentally in their mental health? I would also say or ask that if you start making decisions on behalf of the parents and in their children's physical well-being, that you would also take responsibility for their mental health as well, and amped up your mental health services and amped up anything that can be done there. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Emily Martin and then Maria Rudy. Ms. Martin is from 11th Street South.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Okay. My daughter will be in second grade at EP Rock, and my other daughter is starting 4K there this year. I'm terrified of speaking publicly, FYI, but I just wanted to share my perspective as a nurse in the emergency department at HCMC in Minneapolis. While we were initially enjoying a summer seemingly free of COVID, the COVID positive cases are indeed trickling back into our hospital. We are starting to see an uptick in critical COVID patients as well, particularly with the unvaccinated. Our hospital tends to see such trends first in the metro area. Therefore, I know that this will be occurring eventually, if not already, in our own community here in Hudson. I understand that many parents are opposed to mask wearing, and this is a theme you have to balance as school officials. Regardless, I'm urging you to reinitiate the mask wearing mandate at school in order to protect the district children. If all else, require masks for children less than 12 years old who are ineligible for vaccination and at the mercy of our decisions. I want you to know how much I appreciate the school district and all that it has already done for my children. We've had an excellent experience thus far with Hudson schools. I believe last year you handled the unforeseen pandemic very well. I'm as sick of COVID as you may be. I'm sick of masks, perhaps arguably even more as a healthcare provider. I've seen personally hundreds, if not thousands of COVID patients. I've worked with them. And I know in my heart that due to rising COVID cases, a mask mandate is necessary once again as a simple intervention that allows unvaccinated kids to attend school in person while greatly decreasing the risk of transmission. Heaven forbid even one Hudson School District child or staff member became another statistic in COVID-related deaths or long-term complications. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Maria Rudy. And then our last speaker for the public hearing is Amy Bill.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board. And I want to just reflect for a moment and say, as I look out in the room, I see an overwhelming amount of support for our children and a modeling of the behavior that we hope that they engage in when they find somebody that they may not see eye to eye with. My sister is in the White Bear Lake School District, and they have their school board meeting going on right now, talking about their COVID plan, and they had to shut the meeting down 20 minutes into it because of how contentious it became. And so I thank everybody for respectfully listening to one another. We may not see eye to eye on everything, but we are united in our love of our children and wanting the best for them. I have 2 kids in the district, a 5th grader this year and a 6th grader. I am greatly concerned that my children are not age eligible for vaccines. I do believe that the science shows us that masks work, and masks were part of our layered mitigation strategy, which our public health professionals and our infectious disease professionals have all recommended that we follow. And I implore you to listen to the professionals with the training and the knowledge who have spent years studying and pulling all of the data and saying, what does the preponderance of the evidence tell us is our best strategy? We will not eliminate risk, but we can do everything we can to mitigate it. And layered strategies is our best effort, and masks are a part of that. If you do not, you must immediately open up the option for parents who have kids who are not eligible for vaccines to allow them to enroll in online learning, something we were forced to make a decision on May 15th of this year. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Amy Bill from 6th Street North.
Thank you very much for having this forum and for allowing people to speak. I have 2 children older than her in the district. One is going into 2nd grade, and my son is supposed to be going into 4K. My concern is with my son that is going into 4K. He has sensory processing disorder, and we are trying our hardest to get him the proper evaluations and diagnosis that he needs. And I have been told by several, his pediatrician, other medical professionals, we cannot get our proper evaluations done until he has started school. He will not wear a mask. We avoid going anywhere that he has to wear a mask because he just won't. And if my son cannot attend school because he can't wear a mask, how do I get the evaluations that he needs so that I can get the proper diagnosis so that then he can come into school? If he doesn't have a diagnosis, how will he get an exemption from the mask? And that's one of my main concerns. Also, my daughter, who went to school here last year wearing a mask, it was hard. She came home every day and talked about how she wished she could actually go play with her friends. And, all these things that our kids need. They need socialization. They need to play with their friends, and they need to not be scared about it. My other concern is reading what you guys put out about the masks is if my children are at their desk, socially distanced in the classroom, they will still be required to wear the mask, but the teacher up front who is teaching will not be if she is distanced or he. And to me, that's a problem. Because how do our kids understand that difference? That, to me, does not make sense, and it's a double standard. And how are our kids going to understand why their teacher doesn't have to wear the mask, but they do? And I just thank you very much. I really hope you consider keeping masks optional for all of our children this year. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the public hearing on the COVID-19 plan. Next on the agenda is citizens' request to speak about non-action items, and we have one request from Tammy Muth Hayden of Canyon Boulevard, and she is speaking on school start times.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm not talking about the mask tonight, but I just wanted to come before you tonight because some of you know, about 3 years ago, I came in front of the board to express my concern about research that I had been hearing about school start times affecting children's health when school start times for teens and tweens are early. That does not allow them to get a good night's sleep. And while this might not seem as important as masking right now, I ask that you please don't let this go by the wayside. I know you guys have a lot going on with COVID and masks and all, but this is important for our children's health too. And I hear everyone talking about their children's health, and I think we need to not forget that when children don't get enough sleep, and research is abundant on the lack of sleep that the early school start times is contributing to this lack of sleep, does lead to anxiety, obesity, car accidents, academic implications. So I know that you formed a committee that looked at school start times, and I was really heartened when I heard that. And I know people who were on the committee, and I think that there was good faith in the development of that committee. And now I would ask that as you look at the results, the committee overwhelmingly supports change within the school district start times. And my understanding is that one of the options that's being put out there is no change. And that really is not what the committee had come up with. So if you went to to form the committee. People spent their time, they did their research, and they made a decision. And I would ask that you carefully consider that decision. And my understanding is you're going to put out a community survey. My understanding is that is what the committee was for. There was people that could apply to be on the committee that were chosen. That was a cross-section. They were people who had the time and the willingness to do the research. And if now you're going to put it out to the community, I would ask that somehow then we need to make that same research available to the community that will be putting their input. And I would ask that you allow committee members to participate in the development of the community survey. And again, I guess I would really ask why you have put no change as an option when there was a 4-to-1 majority that there needed to be change. So that's just what I wanted to bring up tonight. And I hope you will strongly consider those things I brought up. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up on the agenda is Superintendent Reports, plural. I guess we start with the COVID-19 operational update.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Hopefully people can hear me. The COVID operational update is going to be very brief because we're going to be talking more about where we're sitting COVID-wise as we look at the back to school blueprint. Item B in the topics for discussion and action. We're continuing to monitor the situation around St. Croix County, around our school district. We are currently, we finished our first week of our second session of summer school. And we just had our first day of our second week of the second session today. We are kind of been back in swing. We've had a lot of kids in the buildings. And so, right now things are holding pretty steady. And it's been, pretty positive experience this summer. We have worked on the back to school blueprint, which was, a recommendation to give to the board that we went over with you at your last work session, as we talk about, the need to approve that and then essentially reapprove it every 6 months until 2024 as outlined by the federal government. So, the operational side of things, some of the data and things like that, I'll be talking about as we get into the back to school blueprint. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time there. As far as school start update or start of school update, just want to point to a couple of items. School is just right around the corner. It seems like this summer has flown by. We just had our administrative retreat today with our leadership team, really kind of planning and getting ready for the school year and the long term. Not just this year, but several years on the road as we try to operationalize our strategic plan. But a couple of dates that are coming up, I put in there, our welcome back. Our summer academy is coming up the 16th through the 18th. That's where we're doing some data workshops and different things that are going on in the district with our staff. We have some different trainings that are going to be coming on or coming up. Our new staff are reporting on Thursday, the 19th. Is that right, Andrea? The 19th. So our new staff will be reporting. Do you have how many new staff we have in the district approximately?
As of right now, I believe it's 40 certified staff, 41 actually as of today.
41 certified teaching staff in the district. So we'll be going through training with them starting next Thursday. And then the following Tuesday, the 24th, is when the rest of all of our staff report. The back to school kind of rally that we do with all staff. It's right here at the high school. That is on Wednesday, the 25th. We have our wellness walk. We start with that, which is a great time. It's been tremendously attended in the past. And so we're encouraging board members who would like to come. And then we have our, our welcome back meetings and messages. And so it's just a great way to kick off the year. Look forward to doing that in person this year. Last year we couldn't do that. We did kind of some mini things, across the district in each of the buildings, but really looking forward to that opportunity to being back in person. And then our first day of school is August 30th. So it's right around the corner. We're going to continue to kind of push through. So just kind of a heads up is what we have, what we have coming up. I know we have, school practices have already started, whether it be for marching band or for football. We have other sports that are going to be starting up here shortly, and different music competitions and things like that. So we are in full swing. We are definitely moving along as we go. The next item I wanted to touch base on is staffing and enrollment. So as Andrew said, we have 41 new certified staff here. We do have fewer sections this year of elementary than we had last year. I think we have 99 sections of our elementary. And when we say sections, we mean classroom sections. So like a first grade, second grade, third grade across the district. Last year we had 104 sections, I think it was. So we are, we're down about 5 sections. And I think, one of the things that we trying to let people know and remind them is there's a lot of construction going on in Hudson. It's not yielding very many kids. The cost of housing in Hudson is extremely high. And, so our enrollment has been pretty stagnant over the last 5 or 6 years. We've made adjustments staffing wise as that has happened. I think 6 years ago, when I came, I think we were right around 112 sections, 113 sections of elementary. And right now we're at 99 sections elementary. Now we would anticipate that it's going to start to bounce back a little bit. We were down quite a few students last year as we started the year, and nobody quite knew what was going to happen with COVID. And we are starting to see the numbers bounce back, but we're going to be keeping an eye on that. And we're just kind of letting people know that, it's kind of an odd thing. You're seeing all this construction going on in the district, and you're seeing all these things being built, and yet we're not growing. And that's a real challenge for us. And so we're going to continue to keep an eye on that. And then the last thing I want to touch base on is just the work session August 30th. So that we originally were going to have a work session on the 23rd. I don't think we could get a quorum of the board, maybe potentially at that time. So I think Tim checked with all the board members, August 30th work for the August work session. So we'll be having that work session on August 30th, just our regular normal August work session. So with anything else, that's all I have for superintendent's update.
Any questions for Nick? Bob?
Yes, and just a question about class sizes, number of students per class. Are we weighting our classes at all? We make those determining factors when we fill our classrooms, as far as like if is any weight given to number of IEPs or students with language issues or special needs per class? Does that affect the number, the guided line of maximum students per class?
I think, it is our goal to make sure that we are having classes that are spread out. We're not just having a class that has all special ed students that happen to have special needs, or all students that happen to have ELL or things along those lines, English language learners. But no, as far as saying, okay, this kid is counting as more than one kid because they happen to have an IEP or they happen to be at risk or something along those lines. No, we haven't done that per se. Again, we look at our class size guidelines and we try to remind people that that's what they are. They're guidelines. They're not hard and fast numbers. And because we have neighborhood elementaries that sometimes can be 2-section buildings or 3-section buildings and sometimes 4-section buildings, what can happen is, though we have to go above those guidelines on occasion or go below those guidelines because if we try to add a section right when we hit the top of the guideline, all of a sudden it throws the class size is really small. And sometimes, if we don't wait long enough, the class size can get kind of big. Inevitably, it seems like whenever we decide not to split a section, we get a lot of move-ins, and we end up with really big class size. And when we're like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna add another section of first grade or second grade in a building. Inevitably, we get move outs, and then the numbers come down. So, not that there's anything scientific about that, but that's kind of the way it works. But so we're continuing to watch it. We'll look at the guidelines. The guidelines from kindergarten to second grade are 18 to 22, third grade to fifth grade. The guidelines are 22 to 27. It was interesting as Tim Erickson and I met with our architects to kind of get the facility committee ramped up, and we asked them about class size guidelines, what they thought, because they work with a lot of school districts, and as you plan for facilities, you have to have these numbers. And I think on the Wisconsin side of the river, we're right where a lot of districts are. And if you were to compare us to schools in Minnesota, we actually have low class sizes compared to the other side of the river. And so it's a balancing game, but that's probably a really long answer to a short question. But no, we don't weight kids per se to say, okay, you have this many special ed students, so now all of a sudden you're going to have fewer students overall.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Nick on any of his reports? Hearing none, move on to the consent agenda and would entertain a motion for the spending as it appears in the agenda.
So moved.
Well, we need the,
I tried.
yeah.
Mr. President?
Yes.
If I speak slowly, it will come up on the screen. There we go. I move that we approve the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,641,485.84.
Is there a second? Okay, I heard a second over here. Was that Carrie? All right, Carrie, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The motion is approved. Any report on any of the consent items then? No, okay. Then moving on, we have COVID-19 back to school blueprint is the agenda item.
So this is the document that I think, or this is the document that the public hearing was about to get public feedback. We've gone through this document with the board. I'm not going to go through everything line by line as we've done before. A couple things I want to highlight. We do have our guiding principles that we've tried to maintain all the way through last year and through this year as we look at making decisions. If you go on to the third slide, the way we set up this third slide is in direct reflection to what we got as feedback from board members when we talk about our general operations. What we were hearing last year from the board and even this summer was, what does our most recent school data tell us, then our community data, and then how well can we implement our mitigation procedures. And so that's, as we made these recommendations to the board as a back to school plan, that's the data that we tend to look at. And we do believe that the events that we have, that the activities that we have, the interactions that we have with kids are very important, and we want to continue to have them. As we continue to move through this plan, obviously, I think one of the biggest questions or the biggest hot button items is our masks. Do they continue to be optional? Does the board want them to be optional? Do they want to accept the plan or how that works? And as we looked at making this recommendation, we did look at the data and we tried to look at where we're sitting. And right now, as a county, we're sitting very similar to where we were sitting when the board took action to make mask optional on the 24th of May. Now, the biggest difference with it is, the Delta variant that's out there. And, we don't know what that's going to look like in the district. But what we do know is that for this summer, we have been mask optional. We've had, I would say, in talking with the different directors and the different programming, we're probably 95 to 97% of our students do not wear masks when they come to our events, or whether it be summer school, school age care, Raider Elite, band practices, all the different things that we have going on. We've had a total this summer, I think, of 9 cases across the district. We know that the cases were not tied to what was going on in our buildings. And so, as of right now, the recommendation would be, looking at our local data, it would not point to making a change in the recommendation. It would say to continue to, go optional. Now, that doesn't mean that they're optional necessarily for the rest of the year. It doesn't mean that they necessarily are optional, for 2 weeks or 5 weeks. But I guess, the recommendation as it comes down to masking would be, the next 2 weeks going to be pretty telling for us, I believe. I think that the board should potentially revisit this on a regular basis. But I think we're gonna have a pretty good idea as we still are 3 weeks out from today from our first day of school that, if the Delta variant does really take hold in our community, I think we're going to see quite a spike in cases. And I think, we will need to kind of cross that bridge when we get there. If it doesn't, if we continue to stay at about the same level we've been all summer and our programming, then I think, we would be in a pretty good spot to be able to maintain optional masking. Some people will say this is an easy decision. Both sides of the argument will be, this is easy. It should be optional, or this is easy. They should be mandatory. And I think, as you all know, sitting up here, there's nothing easy about this decision because there's a lot of different factors in play. And as we drafted this whole plan, we do look at the guidance from the CDC. We do look at the guidance from public health. We do look at the guidance from DPI. We do look at the guidance from the different folks. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can follow every piece of guidance to a T. And, last year we had this conversation because the guidance was very, very stringent coming from the CDC as we were getting ready to open school. And, had we had followed that, to a T, we probably wouldn't have been able to open schools because we couldn't have operated that way. And so it's trying to find a balance when we look at this stuff as we roll this thing out and make adjustments. I understand that the threat of COVID, I think it's very real. I think vaccines are our number one, way to get over this hump. But I think right now, as we look at this, I think this plan is a balanced approach. It's what we've been doing basically this summer with pretty good success. And like I said, if all of a sudden, things start to take a turn the other direction, then I think, the board could then act and say, you know what, we've tried optional for a while. It's not working. We can, potentially go for a mask mandate for a specific amount of time, maybe a few weeks, or what it may be. So there are other things that are in this blueprint that I just want to touch on. Responses to positive cases. One of the biggest changes that probably comes with that is, as a school district, we are no longer doing the contact tracing as it relates to us going through trying to figure out all of the who are all the contacts, and as it relates to close contacts, if public health, we're giving that back to public health. That is kind of their realm. So our plan would be, if we had a positive case in a classroom, if it was an elementary classroom, we would send a letter home to all the parents in that classroom, letting them know that there's been a positive case in the classroom. Keep an eye on your kids. If they have symptoms, go get them tested, so that we can kind of keep moving on. But we wouldn't be moving to the quarantining of kids that happen to be sitting next to the kids in school and along those lines. We did, and I think some people say, well, how could you move away from that? And I think the biggest thing is we quarantined the nurses. They did an excellent job last year. They took a ton of heat, and but they did everything we asked them to do. But we quarantined a ton of kids, several thousand kids over the course of the year as it related to close contacts, and we just didn't see those turn positive. Now, it's not to say that we didn't see positive cases come from close contacts. What I'm saying is we didn't see, Johnny in third hour English test positive and the 3 kids sitting around him now all test positive. We just didn't see that. We did see a lot of Johnny's positive, had a sleepover, and now 3 or 4 other kids are positive. We did see that. I mean, or we saw mom was positive and then dad was positive and then kids were positive. So, we did see that. And now we don't know with the Delta variant if all of a sudden we are going to see more school spread. And we'll have to keep an eye on that. But so one of the things that in this plan has contact tracing going back to the county for them to do their contact tracing as we look through it. In this plan, we would honor the counties. If the county quarantines somebody, we would honor their quarantine. As far as working through this, we want to keep up hand washing, disinfecting, things like that. We know washing hands it's good hygiene procedures, and it's really helped with our elementary kids. A lot of the procedures that we had in place last year, we know there's a dramatic drop in a lot of the other illnesses that we typically see during a school year. And it's, had a variety of different things. We're planning on keeping our ventilation running at as much fresh air as our systems can handle. It's a little bit more expensive because you're bringing in more, especially in the winter, you're bringing in a lot more cold air, and so you have to heat that up. But we think that that definitely plays a role in keeping kids healthy, and even in the summers, obviously you're bringing in a lot more fresh air, and then you have to cool it down. But we're planning on maintaining increased fresh air intake into our buildings. Transportation is a little bit more of a challenge. There is a federal mandate, and we are required, according to our legal counsel, to follow mandates. We don't have a choice. And the exposure that we have, liability-wise, is not would not be advised for the board not to follow mandates. And so, right now the order is on our school buses, we have to require masks. It's whether people like it, they don't like it, it's out of our hands. It's not the administration, yes or no. Some people will say, well, can you do civil disobedience and things like that? And I would say we're going to follow the law. And if that's what we're told we have to do, we have to do it. And so, we have that piece in there. Our bus disinfecting, ventilation, we'll keep those going. Safeway's handling that. School meals, the USDA has made school meals free again this year for all students, regardless of need or income levels. And so that will continue as we work through it. Physical distancing, traffic flow, we're going to continue to do our best, with physical distancing and traffic flow. I mean, this was one of those things that when we opened last year, we couldn't hit. We couldn't, last year it was you have to maintain 6 feet. And we said we can't do that. We wouldn't be able to open if we had to require 6 feet. And so we're going to do our best to try to maintain at least 3 feet, especially in the meal lines and things like that. The plexiglass, as of right now, is gone away at lunchtime. We have it in case we need it. If all of a sudden we see an uptick and we're seeing a lot of spread, we can bring it back. But as of right now, the plexiglass would move away. Moving into staff training and expectations, really it's the same things we've been doing all year long. And just them understanding what the expectations are of the district. And then, we have some, what do I do if I get sick at work? And we talked about in our leadership team meetings today, we'll make sure we're conveying the message to our staff that, if you have questions about COVID or COVID related issues, that you just contact the Human Resource Department, Andrea's department, and she'd be the best person to kind of talk through that with that. We get down into instruction and the recommendation, and we talked about this, I think the board took action on this spring, is that instruction is in person. We gave an option for a virtual option, and people had to make that decision by May 15th, and people will say, well, why did you force it so early? Well, we have to hire staff, and we have to be able to staff our buildings. We have to be able to build our budgets. And so if all of a sudden we're going to have 300 or 400 students that are going to choose that virtual option, then we have to be able to staff that virtual option. We had 19 students, I believe, at this point that chose the virtual option. It's not the same option as it was this current year. It is not IDL. It's not Zooming into classes. It is purely an online asynchronous, for the most part, model. If students happen to have to quarantine because they're sick or any other illness, we would handle their instruction the way we handled it pre-COVID, which is they would check in with their teachers, email teachers back and forth, get assignments, things along those lines. But there'd be no more of the Zooming into classes, expecting teachers to teach both virtually and face-to-face at the same time. I think it served our children well last year, but it also about killed our staff. And so, I think, it served its course. And so the recommendation is obviously daily instruction is to be face-to-face. School visitors and volunteers, we're looking at allowing essential visitors and volunteers in the buildings. So that means we have certain folks that come in and volunteer in classrooms and do some of those things, but still, we would start allowing those back in the buildings. But however, we probably would still not allow hey, I just want to come in and eat lunch with my kid. We didn't do that all last year. There's a lot of school districts that don't allow that ever. And it's been a practice in Hudson to do that. But at this point, those non-essential volunteers or visitors, we would still say, hey, we don't want to bring any more people in than we have to bring into the buildings. As it relates to special education, I think the thing to remember, and it's the same thing through this whole process, is we will continue to provide special education services. And for most of our kids, that's face-to-face and that's in person, but we do have, some students that may be, compromised, and we'd have to provide those services in a different setting or a different option, but we will meet our obligations and our intentions by the not just the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And I think the next paragraph on this slide is one of the most important, and I think several speakers talked about it tonight, is this social emotional well-being of our kids. We know that for some of our kids, they've been out of face-to-face school for over a year. When we finished the school year in the spring, we had over 300 students at the high school alone that were still out on IDL. I would say that the majority of those kids were not out because of health or safety reasons. They started to kind of like the fact they could get up at 7:15 for maybe a 7:28 class and roll out of bed without having a shower or try to, navigate the parking lot in the mornings. And so, but nevertheless, there's some social isolation there. And as kids come back into the buildings, we're going to have to keep an eye on that. And we talked about it today in our meetings, that we wanted to really make sure that we are keeping a heightened sense of what's going on with our kids and trying to be more proactive and keeping an eye on our kids. And not that every person in the school district has to be a mental health professional. That doesn't work. However, we expect all of our employees in the district to be able to identify kids that are in crisis, kids that are in need, and refer them to people that can help them, and to be able to work through that. And that's the different trainings that we've gone through. School age care, we've been running school age care this summer, as we have in past years. We would continue to run school age care before and after school care in our elementary buildings coming up here this fall. Athletics at this time, athletics activities would be expected to operate as normal. That would be plays, concerts, athletic events, outdoor events, indoor events. And right now the recommendation is still mask optional and no limits on spectators. So not that those things can't change, but in talking with our other partners in the conference and where they're sitting, our plan aligns very closely with what area school districts are doing and what other school districts in our conference are doing. And I kind of jumped ahead a little bit with concerts and large events. No events or no restrictions there, but then field trips. We're looking at bringing field trips back and working through that. Now, again, this is a fluid plan. And the reason I say that is because we do have to be adjustable. Last year, if you remember, we adjusted the school closure matrix several times because had we just set it at the beginning of the year and said we're going to follow it in stone, there would have been a time when we would have went totally virtual because what was going on in the county was much greater than what was going on in our buildings. And so it is important for us to stay flexible. And I think it's important for us to stay flexible both ways. Sometimes we need to loosen things up and sometimes we need to tighten things up. And it's trying to be, what we think is reasonable as we work through this process. And the last piece is the community education and fitness center. Again, it's going back to kind of a more business as usual. And again, keeping in mind that, things can change and we may have to be flexible as we move forward. With that being said, I guess I open it up for questions or whatever conversation you'd like to have.
There's questions of Nick.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I know many of the folks who were here with us tonight noted that we are not healthcare professionals, and they're right, we're not. So how, when it comes to policy decisions related to health, the health of our students, our staff, and in this case, the health of the community at large, can we not look to those who are healthcare professionals, those who are experts, healthcare experts, for guidance? On each of the slides of our back to school plan, we state that consideration will be given to guidelines from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, St. Croix County Public Health, and the CDC. The recommendation of each of these entities, plus the American Academy of Pediatrics, which represents 70,000 pediatricians, including about 50,000 board-certified pediatricians, is that we should be requiring masks in all of our school buildings. To my knowledge, there's not a single county, state, or national healthcare or public health organization recommending that masks be optional in schools. In our region, many look to the Mayo Clinic as a reliable source for healthcare information. A study they released last week again affirmed that cloth masks work, that when I wear a mask, I protect you, and when you wear a mask, you protect me. When we met 2 weeks ago, the situation was actually quite different than it is this evening. The Mayo Clinic has a site with maps of every state in the country, county by county, and you can watch the 7-day average of positive tests change over the last 60 days. The first 45 days, which would lead up to our last meeting, Wisconsin and Minnesota were both pretty yellow. The changes over the past 2 weeks, as you watch that slide move day by day, are alarming. Last year, our discussion about whether or not to follow CDC recommendations was about logistics. I remember, Nick, us talking about the fact that we can't space kids 6 feet apart. Like, it's not possible in our space. There's no logistical barrier to following the recommendations of the CDC, the Wisconsin Department of Public Health, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and our own county public health department, as well as the AAP around masking. Based on their review of research, these medical experts, the folks that we should look to because we're not medical experts, are recommending universal masking in school settings. If, due to the current relatively low, though rising numbers in our county, our board does choose to make masks optional, I would like to see us develop a matrix similar to what we developed at the beginning of last year when we had something relatively new and we didn't know where it would go, so that as we move forward, it's clear to us, clear to parents and other community members, what we are going to base our decisions on. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have a comment or a motion?
Mr. President, I
Yes.
have something to say. So as I was looking at some of the data that we're talking about, the professionals in our community, I looked at the St. Croix County website and I noticed a few things that were discrepancies in my opinion. It was stating that 15% of our population has COVID from what I could ascertain from this information. And when I go ahead and look at that, there's the 100,000 people that they're looking at for our population. 8 people have tested positive in the last week. This information was from 8/5. That would be actually 0.0008% of our population that has COVID. And so I'm a little bit concerned if we're looking at this data, if it's correct. And I also note, I actually am a healthcare provider, and I'm a mother. And I think that a mother or a father are the people that can make the most important choices for their kids. And I don't feel like it's up to me as a school board member to make that decision for parents. If you decide to send your kids to school with a mask, that's fine. But I'm not, as a board member, going to tell parents that they have to send their kids to school with a mask. I don't think that's my role. So again, I would like to make sure that this information that we're looking at from St. Croix County is correct. When and if we make decisions.
Is your comment done?
Done.
Okay. And just to piggyback on what you said, Kate, I think a couple things. Number one, when it said 14.8% people testing positive, I don't think that means 14% of all people in the county. They mean 14% of the people who are being tested are coming up testing positive.
Okay.
And that was one. And then as far as the 8 people That's in a day, I think.
Correct.
That's in one day. So that's new people. And I think the average quarantine is 14 days. And I don't know what the average length of COVID is. We've got experts here that have had COVID sitting at these tables. I think it's 7 to 10 days typically before you can test negative. So I think that if there's 8 people in a day, then and an average is 7 to 10, that means we're having 56 to 80 roughly people that are having COVID. And this is where, to mention Nick's point, is, last year we didn't follow the CDC guidelines to a T, because if we did, we would have gone to, kids going to school every 3rd day or going totally online, which is what most of the state of Minnesota did. And I would argue that the decisions we made put our kids in a better position learning-wise today because we kept them in school than what Minnesota did by going all virtual. But anyway, I guess I don't want to go down too many of the comments, but I think the most important thing is that we're all in this together. We all want to try and do what's best for our kids. I agree that with the speaker who said that everyone who spoke tonight wants to do what's best for our kids. And I think that there is consideration that needs to be made for the mental health aspects all the way around, whether it's wearing a mask or whether it's feeling safe in school. But there's risk in everything we do. And we can never eliminate the risk completely. If we wanted to do that, then we'd say tonight, let's take a vote and go online. And I don't think there's a single board member that wants to go 100% online. We tried mask optional. We took that vote in May, correct?
Mhm.
And this is the question that I have, because I'm always about fairness. And did we take that vote before we had the deadline for people to sign up virtual? It would have been close in timing.
It would have been really close. Dave, you remember?
Because, when we took that vote to go optional, it wasn't necessarily that it was going to expire. We always said that we were going to continue to re-examine it. And I would be in favor of doing that because this thing could change. It changed in the last year. And I think the changes that we made were for the good. The reason that, when we get a motion on the floor, that I would be in favor of the blueprint, if you will, is that where I would differ maybe with the CDC on some of this. They are generally the experts, but this whole determination between what is substantial transmission and what is high transmission, I'm looking at the CDC site, and it says total new cases per 100,000 persons in the past 7 days. Substantial is 50 to 99. That's where St. Croix County is. Now, originally, when the mask, CDC announced that now even vaccinated people have to wear a mask in the areas where it was high transmission. And then in a matter of days, all of a sudden they went, well, high, now it's high and substantial. Now, they would have had me if they kept it at high, because if we're talking about high transmissions and doing something to mitigate, then I probably would be in favor of starting with masks at the beginning of the year. But I would say that any decision we make tonight with this blueprint is going to be subject to seeing how it goes. If we have a huge spike, there's going to be, or ought to be, a reconsideration of where we're at. I don't think we should be setting something for the entire year.
Mr. President, just to clarify, last Thursday, the CDC updated their guidance that regardless of transmission, they're recommending them for all schools, not just high or moderate transmission, but their current guidance is for all schools to require masks.
Mr. President,
I guess it's hard to keep up. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we voted on May 10th was when the meeting was held here at Rivercrest. To Heather's point, if we are going to, for transparency's sake, develop a matrix, I would suggest that it be school by school rather than district-wide. But to the point that families had to decide about distance learning on May 15th prior to really any knowledge of the Delta variant and how it seems to be so much more transmissible to children and just the, how much more easily it spreads. I don't know what can be done in 3 weeks to increase the IDL, but I think those are very valid concerns that families have for, particularly if they have students that are 12 and under, that a vaccine is not yet an option. If you're over 12 and you choose not to vaccinate, that's your choice. But for all of our elementaries and our 6th grade students, they don't have that option.
Any other comments, or is there a motion?
Let me comment, Jamie. Mr. President, sorry. I think, the goal last year was to keep schools open safely as best we could. I think we achieved that. I think the community was happy with the results on that. And while we did not ignore the science, we had the tools, we used plexiglass masks, sanitizing, increased airflow. I think, we did not follow the CDC, like you said. We were flexible. We did make changes. And I think we should continue to be flexible. I think we should, obviously we're doing the sanitation or sanitizing and the traffic flow and the ventilation. I think we should watch those numbers very closely. I'm not willing to, as you said, Jamie, to guarantee for the year either way. I think we need to continue to be flexible and watch those numbers. I think the busing concern, obviously, I'm with Nick on that. There's nothing we're going to do about that. I do think it creates confusion for parents. I do also feel that the K through 6 is that they don't have the choice to have their kids vaccinated. That I understand that concern, but I think if we watch those numbers very close and if the community understands that we will move if we have to on certain things, bringing back the plexiglass, bringing back masks. The goal is to keep schools open. And if that means masks, that means masks. I don't want to get in a position where we don't make changes when necessary if the numbers start going up and the decision is made for us to close our schools down because of infection rates. Thank you.
I just had a question. Nick, you had said, how much was the percentage that you were thinking kids were wearing a mask for summer?
Oh,
or
I
not?
mean, it's just, it's anecdotal, but I would say it's probably, fewer than 5% of our kids are wearing a mask in summer activities. I think that'd be a reasonable assessment. Yeah.
Mr. President?
Yes.
This is hard. So when I think about, we received a lot of emails leading up to this meeting. I'm ballpark. I think they were probably about evenly split, which surprised me. And I think both sides, as you alluded to earlier, on the one side, folks are saying, I assume we're going to follow the guidance. And on the other side, folks are saying, I assume you're going to let parents choose. I mean, so very different perspectives on what should guide our decisions. The comments here tonight were not evenly split. I acknowledge that, probably about 4-1 in favor of optional masks. I do think, two things that resonated with me tonight. One we were just speaking about was the fact that parents had to elect online learning before Delta hit. And so that they were in a very different environment from a risk standpoint than they are now. I think the other thing that we didn't necessarily hear comments from tonight, but saw a lot in the emails from folks who were supporting mask mandates was the request that if we're not going to have a mask mandate across the district, could we at least have a mandate, have masks be required for K-5 until that vaccine is available for those kids? that's something we haven't talked about, but would be something else to consider, acknowledging that while vaccination doesn't completely protect folks, I think it gives a lot of reassurance to people and parents. You know, and that would be something to consider, would be that until we do have a vaccine that's available for the children of those parents that want their children to be vaccinated, that we provide or require masks in those K-5, pre-K, 4K-5 school settings until there's a chance for those kids to be vaccinated.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you. I agree with the commentary or the point that we need to have a matrix. I really think we need to be perhaps even looking down at the classroom level to see what's going on. I think right now it's a crapshoot what's going to happen. There is more than 58% of our school district residents are vaccinated almost fully. There's like 57% have only had the first dose. There's less than 4,000 kids from 0 to 11 in our school district that have not been vaccinated. So if you take out 0, 1, 2, 3, I don't know what numbers we'd get at. I think this is incredibly difficult. I go back and forth all the time in my head. I respect the opinion of people who say it's my child. I make those decisions. But the other hand is we have kids who are vulnerable, regardless of sometimes we think that kids aren't vulnerable to COVID. They are. In the last year, from March 2020 to March 2021, in Brazil, over 1,500 children under the age of 1 died of COVID. And that could be relative to other things other than just COVID. Healthcare, quality of life. But while I totally respect parents and their right to do what's best for their child, I feel an enormous responsibility for 5,000 plus kids. It's not just my kid. It would be heartbreaking if we went the wrong direction and something terrible happened. The flip side making this difficult is I think we're in an okay place right now. It's not great, but like I said, it's a crapshoot. It could go either way. So I would suggest we do set up the matrix, have some data, revisit this every 2 weeks, and expect that things will change. It's probably not going to stay the same, one way or the other. Thank you.
Any other comments or motion?
Mr. President, I guess my question of Dr. Olet would be, I know we talked at a previous session about being very clear about board requests. I guess if Molly, I would support that being a formal board request, that we develop a matrix. And so I don't know if that's a board motion, Jamie, Nick, or how you'd like that to proceed, but I wouldn't want us to finish this conversation thinking that we hadn't, I would like us to land somewhere. So if we're landing at consensus around, yes, we should have a matrix, then let's land there knowing that when we get together next time, we'll have a draft matrix to look at. So I guess, should I make that motion, Jamie? Is that how you'd like us to proceed?
Well, any board member is free to make the motions that they want. I guess, yeah, I was looking for some kind of action for us to give direction to the administration, whether that's we're going to adopt the blueprint in total 100% tonight, or we're going to ask that this be reexamined at our August 30th meeting and that we just kind of keep things where they're at until then, or we adopt the guidelines subject to getting a matrix in place and then reviewing this on at least a monthly basis. I mean, you can word the motion in several different ways.
Thanks. Yep. I know we have the ability to make a motion. I was just wanting to be clear because at our last work session, we were asked to be clear about when we were providing staff guidance. So thank you. Yeah, so then I would move that we adopt the plan with an intention to complement it with a matrix, which we would ask staff to bring to us for review at our next work session.
Do you, and I know there's kind of a motion, I'm probably a little bit out of order here, but so August 30th is your next work session. That is the night after the first day of school. So the night of the first day of school, I'm sorry. Would there be interest in the board of us meeting a special session prior to the first day of school, like on the 24th, or is the 30th? Are you guys good with the 30th? In which case, when I understand the motion is mask would be optional as of right now, starting the first day of school.
The latter. I don't sense an appetite from the board to make masks mandatory at this point. That said, I think if in the next 7 days, for instance, and I just assume this would be the case anyway, if we saw a dramatic change, that we would call a special session to review it, but otherwise, that with notwithstanding.
Okay, that's
yeah,
what I just
yeah.
want to make. That's what I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah. So that was not a well-worded motion, but hopefully Tim documented it. And then if someone else thinks that's a generally good idea or wants to amend the motion to make it a little bit more clear, that would be fine as well.
Well, as I understand it, the motion is to approve the blueprint subject to the matrix being reviewed or being created and reviewed by the board on the 30th. Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, I'll give the second to Bob. Now I'll open it up to further comments.
Mr. President,
Yes, Carrie.
I guess I would want the administration to know what the guidelines are for what they'd like on what we'd like on the matrix and what the result would be. I'm assuming we're not going to go into, unless, I guess we would need to maybe have a hybrid situation with a certain level of cases, or I don't think we'd want a remote learning option. So I would guess what we're looking at would be for specific grade levels or buildings, at what point we are talking about a mask mandate, or we need to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, what I was hearing you say is the matrix would be as to when we would mask or unmask at the time, unless the board has an appetite for potentially,
a more complicated matrix, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, and then, really, as we look at that, needing the direction is it in the past, we started at the county level numbers. If you remember our very first school closure matrix, then over the course of the year, we kind of drilled it down into school level numbers. Is that a direction you'd like to see us go? And understand that, again, this will be our best attempt at it, but it's not as though there is a template that we're going to be able to say, oh, well, here's the template to follow for this school. So, it'll be our best attempt at it. So I'm just wanting to know, is it school as the delineating number most important? Is it district? Is it county? Is it state? How would you like to see
Mr.
it?
President,
Yes.
I would hope we would concentrate on our numbers in our district first, like we did previously, and give that extra weight for sure.
And to clarify, when you say our district, we ended with like our actual students and then kind of in the context of our district population
Correct.
at large. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Have flexibility by building? I mean, is that what anybody's thinking as far as
Yes.
had a flare up in one building, would we mandate masks throughout the entire district? Or
And maybe looking at, I don't know, it would seem like it would make it easier if there was a way to parallel, I don't, what the CDC is using for percentages with red, orange, yellow, maybe it's those same levels so that we're not creating something new, but we're applying those same
Yep.
percentages to our student population, student and staff population, and or to our community population.
Mr. President,
Yes.
And that we would continue the flexibility with those reviews. So if we did go as part of our toolbox or whatever, bring masks back in certain schools for certain hotspots, that would review that if those numbers went down to remove masks
Right.
as well. So
Mr. President,
Yes, Kate.
just in the interest of being clear for tonight, I feel like there should be a motion to adopt this back to school blueprint. And then at our next meeting, review some of what a matrix might look like.
I think that's what the motion is.
It sounded like the motion was to adopt the blueprint with a matrix. And now we're kind of discussing what the
I
matrix
think
might
that
look
is,
like.
yeah, that's the motion, is to adopt the blueprint, subject to us getting a recommendation for a matrix and then implementing one.
Okay, but as
Eventually.
a board member, I'd like to know what the matrix looks like before I,
Well, yeah, and I don't think we're committing to a matrix, but I think what Nick was asking was, what kind of things would you want to see in the matrix so that they have some guidance to know what to develop?
So you could split the motion if you wanted to. So you could say, okay, the back to school blueprint as presented, and it's going to be reviewed on the 30th. And then you can make your motion of what you would like to see in the matrix that's going to be reviewed on the 30th. Because like I said, at any point you guys can change it. That's the flexibility, fluidity of the situation. Because we don't have a matrix to share with you right now. I don't have anything to give you. So you could do two separate motions, break it apart with a friendly amendment.
And I guess my response would be, I wouldn't be comfortable adopting the back to school blueprint without the understanding that we are going to work on a matrix. So to me, adopting the blueprint and committing to look at a matrix that would help guide our decisions moving forward. So that's I mean, having both in the same motion.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense. And then, then your second motion could be, these are the things we want in the matrix, or here are some of the parameters so that we have that. So that we have
There's no specificity with regard to the matrix in the motion. Currently, I'm not hearing anyone asking that it be amended. So is there any other questions or comments about this? Yes, I'm supportive of the motion from the standpoint, though, that for it to be successful, it requires a lot of trust. And there was a lot of speakers tonight that asked us to trust parents. We want to be able to trust parents, but it's going to require parents to recognize when their kids have symptoms and don't send their kids to school when they have symptoms. That's going to make the optional mask policy much more successful if we have good adherence to keeping kids home who have symptoms, number one. And number two is if we see a rise in the vaccines. Right now, we're running just under 50% now of the kids 12 to 18. I've seen it go up. That's encouraging. I still wish it was where I think it's at 80% for people over 18. But if we got to that, then we'd have a much, much better chance for this to be a successful policy for the entire year.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Not to imply any distrust of our parents, I would suggest, though, that however much they might want to screen, that it is transmissible before symptoms are evident. So it could be totally inadvertently that a child comes to school and spreads it before the parent then realizes.
That's true. Yeah,
So
I'll give you that. That's a valid point.
Not to.
Yeah.
I just don't want to put a bad light on our parents. I mean, obviously, if they're.
And I wasn't
we're all doing
intending to put
investigating.
bad light
No,
on
no, no.
parents. I was just, pointing
Thank you.
out that we're all in this together, and it's, we don't like to be put in this position, frankly, period, but we are. And so we're trying to make the best policy we can, and it requires a cooperation, just like all of our excellent learning at this school requires teamwork with parents. So.
Well, and Mr. President, I think it's worth just reiterating that, last year at this time, the CDC guidance was around keeping kids home. And I think what we learned from last year is it is best for kids to be in school, period, right? And so we've seen that guidance shift. We've only been talking really about face masks and face coverings, but within those guidelines or those recommendations is really in priority what they would like to see us do. And you just alluded to the most important piece to keeping our kids in school, which is vaccination rates, right? And so I think we're watching those. The second then is the face masks, the distancing. They recommend screening and testing of students and staff. And then what you just alluded to, staying home when you're sick. And so I think we're only talking about masking, but this strategy, this approach to we want our kids in school and ultimately we want our kids in school without masks, vaccinations, face masks, distancing, testing, and staying home are in order. Those top 5 things, they're going to get us to that point where our kids can be in schools without masks again, which is where all of us want to be. So.
Any other comments, Bob?
Yeah, I would just say that with an understanding to from staff, students, families, respect for people wearing masks or not wearing masks, and there will be no tolerance for that type of bullying either way, and be allowed to be in our schools.
Good point. Right. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I'll call the question.
I have just
Okay,
one
go
more
ahead,
thing to
Kate.
say because I think it's important. We got so many emails from so many people, which I think is great because it shows that parents are really involved in their kids' school. And I just want to, I guess, stress the importance of parents deciding things for their own children, whether it's testing, vaccinating, masking. I want people to know that I value that as a board member and that we are listening to you. And I'll continue to keep that under consideration every 2 weeks when we're reviewing this.
All right. Any other questions, comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Motion is approved. Next up on the agenda is the 21-22 Certified Staff Handbook.
All yours, Andrew.
Okay, so I know in my absence, Holly Butler presented this to you at the work session, July 26th. So I certainly want to recognize her for doing that. Don't want to go through all the changes because I know she already did that. I just want to highlight the primary substantive change is the layoff language. And we did that after collaboration with Hudson Lead and having conversations with different groups. So both certified and support staff handbooks have a modified language for layoffs. Other than that, it's primarily updating from year to year and some simple reconsiderations. I'm happy to entertain any questions as well.
Is there a motion to approve the Certified Staff Handbook?
So moved.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion regarding the Certified Staff Handbook, which we discussed at the last work session? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Next up is the Support Staff Handbook.
Same thing, layoff language. Layoff language with support staff was a little unique in that we actually applied it as well as the furlough language this past year. And so through the application, we also learned. And so that's one reason why we're proposing the modifications. And we're also doing our best to align whenever possible, whenever reasonable, the certified and the support staff handbooks. So you'll see a little bit more editing in the support staff handbook and to be consistent with those efforts.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
It was
All
totally
those in
Molly.
favor of approving the Support Staff Handbook as presented by administration and discussed at the last work session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And the Support Staff Handbook is approved. Next up is proposed substitution pay rates. Andrea.
Okay, I'll just keep going. And again, I know Holly proposed this information at the work session, but to go along with that, it is substantially different than what we had this past year, in that we had the $200 for substitute teaching rates. However, it is also higher than the previous year. So we're hopeful that our substitute pools will continue to be adequate going into the 21-22 school year. At the same time, we're trying to be proactive in terms of the existing market out there right now. And so our proposal at this time is the $150 for typical substitute teacher positions. And then for Hudson School District certified staff retirees, it'd be $175 because I'm really passionate about wanting to keep those HSD retirees in our system and not substituting in other districts.
And just to clarify that, retiree goes up if there's consecutive, if they're a long-term sub, basically, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, because that always, and that with our retirees, especially recent retirees, frankly, we often work through different types of hiring arrangements with them to again recognize their time in the district, because they're the best ones that we can then bring back into the classroom because they know what we do and how we do it, and it's a much more effective environment for the kids in those classes.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I was looking through the long-term subs and I saw that Brian Huser is coming back, and my son and I talked about that. And I said, I hope you have as good a teacher in college as Mr. Huser. So awesome work getting him back.
We love having Brian, yes.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there a motion to approve the long-term sub rates,
Motion to approve.
or just the substitute teacher rates? It includes long-term subs. All right.
Motion
There-
to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second by Bob. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. Last but not least, we have the specified support staff wage rates. Andrea?
Yes, so I appreciate Dr. Ouellette's willingness for me to add this to the agenda relatively late, having not discussed it at the July work session. I think it speaks to the fact of the immediacy, the not emergency, but the emergent issue that is now facing us in terms of 55, now I think it's 57 support staff vacancies that we have to hire prior to the start of the school year. Extremely concerned. Some of our candidate pools are zero. Noon duty, we had one candidate, we hired them. It was very competitive amongst the buildings to try to get them. So we have another 16 that we have to fill with respect to noon duty. So what I try to do here is lay out the why, really try to specify why it's important at this time. I think anybody who looks out in the market right now can see, for the first time that I can ever remember, there's closed restaurants, there's Starbucks closing, there's all these different service industries that are not able to staff. There's shortages in most markets at this point. We are one of them. It's the most common topic among HR directors in the schools as well. I'm having another meeting with the Big River Conference on Wednesday, and that's topic number 1, 2, and 3 is what are you going to do if you can't staff your buildings with support staff individuals? Trying to be proactive. I know I talked in June briefly about being concerned and wanting to monitor this, wanting to stay on top of it. And we have done that. We've been advertising on Indeed. Most districts are at this point. We're spending more than we ever have in terms of advertising. We're looking at alternative ways to advertise as well. However, I think ultimately a goal of this recommendation is to increase pay rates of some of our most difficult to fill positions substantially going into the 21-22 school year in a way that we haven't necessarily previously. On top of that, looking at the system as a whole, you'll see now we only have 2 positions. If you look at the larger support staff grid, 2 positions that are less than $15 an hour. I think the $15 threshold is significant. And I think that this proposal, again, moves us in a direction where hopefully we're going to be able to have a more effective path to recruitment of new staff in these particular positions. This is not all of our positions by any stretch. What we did was we looked at the comparable data and as established by the board in terms of the comparable school districts, and tried to especially look at the contiguous districts to see where are people at and why can't we recruit in these areas. And that's what led to our recommendation here tonight that I've been working with cabinet on. You can see the budgetary impact, the cost impact, inclusive of wages and benefits for these modifications. Quick caveat, just because I know you received a draft of this on Friday. We did add in here the fitness center assistant as well, that last category. It was only a $3,000 additional expense, going from $14.23 to $15 an hour. We just had another resignation in that area, and those are really difficult to fill as well. The last piece we want to implement is a $500 signing bonus, $250 after 30 days, another $250 after 60 days enrollment. That's a relatively small cost when you look at all the efforts being made to try to recruit and find people and get them to apply. We do our best to reach out to staff or to reach out to potential staff, and we'll double down on our efforts. But these are some ways that we can increase our chances to be able to, again, staff those 57 positions. The last one is something that we're trying to be creative with respect to crossing guard and noon duty positions. rarely do they make it past the first snowstorm. You know, we have a lot of turnover once it starts getting cold. And so I really like the idea of recognizing those staff members who are doing the jobs that most people don't want to do out in the cold, whether it's standing outside at 7:15 in the morning or being outside with the kids every noon recess, having $1,000 recognition, essentially recognition bonus of that work. And it would be prorated for partial year employment. It would be given to anybody in those positions that does the work for the year. So that's summary of the entire proposal. And again, I appreciate your willingness to consider this kind of without the initial examination at the July 26th work session. It's definitely been a challenge to get to this point of, okay, what is the lay of the land? How do we have the best chance to staff our buildings as we're going into this next year and trying to be adaptable to the really tough job market that's currently out there.
Mr. President. So, Andrea, I fully appreciate and support trying to be creative about how we can get people and keep people. You referred to them as significant increases, which surprised me because my initial thought was, is this really enough to make a difference? You know, I mean, so it's small adjustments to all of these rules, and it ends up being a decent chunk of money in aggregate. How then do we evaluate whether or not this got the results we wanted? Like, will we look at turnover like over the past 5 years and then look like kind of at the next couple of years going forward? Or how do we ultimately assess whether or not this investment was a good one and got the results we wanted?
Very good point. And I think it will be a work in progress because our turnover did go down last year with respect to support staff and certified staff. However, the job market wasn't as tight as it is now, right? Like it just, within the last 12 to 18 months, it went from not the, like special ed paras are one that I always look at. I mean, we never had plenty of applicants, but we had enough applicants for the most part to fill the positions. We don't now. And so it's such a wildly different job market that's out there that I don't know if this, I mean, we had a lot of conversations, should it be 17 instead of 1675? Especially with special ed paras, and then 18 for one-to-one paras. And $16 an hour for school age care. We're trying to find that balance between, you know, the cost impact, but still being able to get people through the door and recruiting people. So do I know that this will be a silver bullet? No, but I think it's significant to have our staff for the most part above $15 an hour. I do think that it is because I think, especially with special ed paras at the 1675 and then ramping that up for steps 2 and step 3 too. We kind of kept percolating, or we kept extrapolating it out. Real dollars for staff, and it balances the recruitment efforts, but also retention efforts. We don't want to upset those people at the top end who don't get a corresponding increase as well. Definitely concerned about the budget, knowing that we've implemented layoffs in the last year too. So trying to find that balance, but we will continue to study to see if it's effective. Hopefully I don't have to come back again because we're unable to continue to fill the positions. I'm hopeful that this will give us enough momentum going forward that we're going to be able to staff these positions.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I appreciate that it's not just about turnover. It's also about applicants. I mean, so I suppose that's another thing that is this new rate enough that we actually now have some applicants to interview, because you can't keep someone if you don't attract them in the first place. So thank you. Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve?
I just have a quick question. Are there staff that maybe have been here for a year that may be lower than these rates?
Our budgetary cost here has everybody applied to it. So everybody who currently is in our system, this applies to them moving forward. So it'll benefit everybody within these positions.
Thank you.
And this bonus to stay the entire year for those crossing guard and the jobs that are tough to keep people all year. Like a crossing guard, is that like roughly 4 hours a day?
Yeah,
No,
2 hours a day sometimes. I mean, because usually about an hour in the morning. They only work about 45 minutes, but we pay them for an hour. And then at the beginning and end. And oftentimes we do loop that around other types of positions if we can, without hitting 40 hours a week and hit overtime. So we try to creatively staff that as well. But it is definitely a time consuming portion of Holly Butler's position is to continuously staff these positions, especially once that first snowstorm or that cold snap happens. Every year we lose people.
Okay. So is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bob, second by Carrie. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And I'll now entertain a motion to,
We don't need it.
we don't need it? Nope. All right, so I'll
Move to
take a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All right. Thanks, Bob. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.